All right, let's talk. Chris Ballard just finished up that end-of-season press conference. Obviously, tradition at the end of every season for the general manager to do as such. And really, it's become one of my favorite pieces of media from the Colts on any given, particularly when we're not winning games. This is such a big moment every year for us to kind of understand where the organization is at, where Chris Ballard's head is at. And listen, here's where we're at, okay? Chris Ballard is the general manager of the Indianapolis Colts, okay? That's not going to change, at least this year. I know we've been disappointed with the product. I know we all want to win. But as it currently stands, the only thing we can do is sit here, watch the offseason, and then wait until next season and see how things play out. And as it stands today, if you have not watched that yet, I guess really what I'm saying right now would not be relevant until you have, but what else is it exactly that you would want from Chris Ballard today, right? Obviously, he can't fix what he's done in the past. Obviously, those mistakes have been made and the results have played out, right? The proof is in the pudding as to what it was, but as it stands today, what else could you have possibly wanted from Chris Ballard? He talked about self-reflecting on the season and changing the way they do things, alluded to bringing in some competition for Anthony Richardson, admitting to being too rigid in his dogma and the way he approaches building a team, admitted to being too emotionally attached to his players, admitting to not bringing in enough competition, admitting to being guilty of falling into the pitfalls of ego and complacency, like DeForest Buckner said. Chris Ballard flat out said in this that the Colts are not close as it currently stands. And yes, that's a reflection on the job he has done, of course, but at the same time, he talked about the idea of earning our trust back and winning, and saying not just in terms of playoffs, right? Like playoffs to him, he said isn't even enough. He's talking about winning big. Now, of course, it's one step at a time, but one thing he made sure to lay out is that the proof of whether or not we should trust him going forward is going to be in his actions over time. That's how he's going to earn the trust back. He's admitted, essentially, go ahead and watch it if you haven't yet. I'm not going to go and quote him all the way. He admitted to every single mistake that he made that I could think of off the top of my head. And he even reflected on times where they were doing things better. He talked about 2020 and when they traded for Buckner and got Rivers, where they were a little more proactive and making sure they were putting a winning roster out there. He talked about the Carson Wentz season. Sure, maybe it ended wrong, but ultimately they were aggressive in making sure that they were bringing in talent that contributed to winning football. You're talking about Stephon Gilmore, Justin Houston, et cetera, et cetera. He spoke about Zaire Franklin kind of indirectly, but talking about how having distractions like that, those things aren't going to contribute to winning. Well, all right. In my eyes, you have a guy here in Chris Ballard who, as much as you may hate him, just said all of the right things in that press conference and let us know how we should judge him, which are by his actions moving forward. Now, of course, there's judgments to be made off of what he did, but at least for right now, given all we can do, like he has the job, right? He has the job, and we're Colts fans. Can we agree to just move forward into this offseason and stop the constant negativity for now and just judge what's in front of us just for one offseason? Then, of course, going into next season, we'll be able to reflect and look and kind of see, was he full of shit in that press conference or was he telling the truth? Because I don't know. Call me a fucking idiot if you want. I believe that he's going to do things a little bit differently this offseason. He consistently said he's been too stubborn and too rigid. A lot of the complaints that we have about Chris Ballard, I thought he flat out not only admitted he was wrong for, but at least alluded to the fact that he's going to be changing those things. Now, he also did mention that he isn't going to be irresponsible in his approach of, bringing in. He said, listen, he has a responsibility to the organization as to not handcuff them for the next X amount of years. So, listen, let's just watch this thing play out, right? That's all we can do. Just watch it play out and be hopeful. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. We'll be able to judge it from there. I mean, as far as just a quick reaction to that press conference, it reminded me of all the reasons that I've liked him in the past. And I know that may be annoying for some of you to hear, but at the same time, even for people who didn't like him, all the criticisms you had of him, he addressed them all in that press conference. So if you watched it, you probably know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, I encourage you to do so after this. I'm going to make sure this isn't too long so you have the time to do that. A couple of other takeaways, just little tidbits from that I thought were interesting. He did confirm the fact that the players did have an hour and a half, I believe, long meeting where they pretty much had to speak about their expectations from Anthony Richardson and maybe why he was falling short of them. So that was a report that was out there that was never technically confirmed. We have confirmation on that from Chris Ballard. He talked about free agency, said he didn't, obviously it's January 10th. He's not going to sit there and say we're signing 25 free agents. But he said they need to get better at identifying the proper free agents and close those deals. So perhaps he's looking at it and saying, I don't know, maybe in the past they haven't had a good plan for free agency. I don't know. I'm not saying he's absolved of that. But again, if we're judging what's in front of us, okay, that's what he said. Spoke about Anthony Richardson and kind of his play this year. Spoke about why he was good in the 2-minute offense and why he feels Anthony Richardson operates well in those moments. And it's because the offense is a little more shrunk down there. Things are a little bit more rigid. It's kind of a set of plays that they have practiced that situation, much like the beginning of a game, too. We've seen Anthony Richardson start hot in a game, and then it's kind of that middle portion of the game where he falls apart. Well, those moments are scripted, or in other words, those are their favorite plays for that given week and are kind of, have been practiced in sequence to some degree going into a week. So those are kind of the situations and the plays that they're most confident in. So, okay, we see Anthony play well in those moments, but how, if he can he fill in the gaps in between the beginning of the game and the end of the game when he has to? How can that get done? I don't know. I mean, we're going to see if it gets done, but that's just a quick reaction. I mean, that's just how I feel coming out of it. I'm probably going to rewatch the thing again at some point and see if there's anything else that maybe I want to talk about, and then maybe I'll touch on it a little bit in a future episode, but that's my quick reaction. My question to you is that as someone who doesn't like Chris Ballard, right? If you hate Chris Ballard, if you watch that press conference, my question to you, and the only question you could take from this is, what else, given that we can only live in the reality that is right now, what else could you have possibly wanted from Chris in that press conference? You might have an answer, but right now, I just can't think of anything. So that's it. Quick episode, just a little tidbit for you on a Friday. My name is Justin. This right here was the Ride the Bench Colts podcast. If you made it to the end, like, subscribe, and as always, go Colts.